Hello everybody and welcome to Vaidya's Chess Hub. In today's lecture, we are going to look at different defensive possibilities against the move 1d4. So the session will be divided into three parts. So in the first part, I will talk a little about the opening theory in the 1d4 system. What are the different defensive setups that you can employ and the ideas and the strategic plans behind each of them, and then I intend to cover two openings in this particular video. One will be Budapest Gambit and the second will be the Nimzo-Indian. So already from the names you can see one is the Gambit and one is the Nimzo-Indian, which is the classical opening. So depending on your style, you can choose any of this opening as a repertoire and you can work on it. There is one thing that I want to tell you all is regarding the opening theory. The opening theory grows every day. There is it can't be controlled really. This opening theory changes with each game that is played, and players are always looking for the new moves that are being employed in those positions. So you have to stay updated yourself as well in that part of the in that part, but the strategic plans and concepts of each opening, they will remain the same. So let us begin with the introduction to opening theory. And as I have been informed, there is no particular system that you yet know about against 1d4. So I would like to go in a bit of a detail here. So let us start from the beginning, that why white plays d4. Now this is a good question to start with. Now if you see the fundamental difference between the move e4 and d4 is that in the e4 openings you usually go for an early attack, or the pieces are developed with tempo. As we know, the definition of a tempo is quite important in any one e4 openings, but it is exactly opposite in a d4 system. So I will give you some examples to see that even though the material is level, one side can still have a lost position. So that are the concepts that are there in d4. And actually, as per Nimzovich's positional play principles, this is the important thing actually, that the strategic and positional play is the real importance, because at some point you will realize that your opponent has a strategic grip over the position. His understanding of the positional things are better than you, and then he might outplay you from there. So the difference between e4 and d4 is actually can be spotted from the first move itself. Like if you see the move e4 allows to develop two of the pieces on the next move, and if we consider the move d4, it only allows the bishop to get developed. So now I will go on explaining you the theory that is there in the d4 openings. So basically there are two schools of thoughts against the move d4. So now I will flip the board and we will view this position from black side. What are the defenses that are possible? In the opening theory lecture, I guess I have explained you regarding this, that there are two schools of thoughts. One is the old classical school, which says that you should put your pawn in the center first. This is the old wisdom, and it is the best moves. Like in this position, there are two most popular moves, which are, one of them is d5 and the other one of them is knight f6. So there are these two big trees that lead to different variations and so on. But now I will also give you some choices in the opening. So what are the moves that you can play against the first move d4? Now to begin with, there is a Dutch defense that you can employ if you are an attacking player, if you like to go for an attack against the king. And of course it's a little positional concession that we are weakening this diagonal, and also if you know the important rule that the pawns don't go back. So later on in middle game, sometimes it may hurt that your pawn is on f5, you would like it on f7 in some of the cases. So that is the case with this move, but it's definitely playable if you know it. It's definitely playable. So Dutch defense is one of the ways to counter, other than knight f6 and d5. Apart from that, there is the move e5, which is known as the England Gambit. Now there is one thing about the gambits. Now their employability is limited to the regions. Like for example, if you are facing a very strong player, let's say in a classical game, and if you employ England Gambit against that player, that player for sure, when he plays 1d4, has studied the opening theory and has learned about these gambits. So about the how much you can trust these gambits, I will say that you can use it in blitz or rapid games. In a classical game, I think you should stick to classical systems. So we will start discussing the classical systems. The fundamental difference between the first move d5 and the move knight to f6 is that we already know that this knight f6 is a hyper modern theory. So basically what black does is he's not controlling the center with the help of pawns, but rather he is going to control it with pieces. So I will first focus on the hyper modern theory, but just to name the gambits, d4 e5 is the England gambit that you can play. But if you want to have a mainline repertoire, Dutch defense is one of the options that you can have along with the knight f6 or d5, the move that you choose. Regarding the Budapest Gambit, which is d4, knight f6, c4 and e5, as I went through the database, this gambit is actually employed by some very top grandmasters as well. I have seen a couple of games of Shakhriyar Mamediyaro in this particular line, who is the was the number one Azerbaijani player. So if someone like him is doing it at the top level, it's a serious opening. I think it's better than England Gambit if we study the theory of this particular opening. So this is one of the line that we are going to cover. Actually, talking a little bit about this line. This reminds me of an Alekhine defense. After d takes e5, black has two moves, knight g4 and knight e4. Both are the possibilities, and this kind of structure looks very similar when white has pushed the pawn, and usually you move knight to d5. We can't do that here because pawn is there, but knight g4, and we are sacrificing a pawn temporarily, but we are going to get our pieces quickly out with bishop c5 and knight c6, and eventually this e5 pawn is captured by black. So this is we are going to see some of the games based on this particular opening. So I think this is a good opening to have in your repertoire as an aggressive and attacking player. I think it has both the flavors of Alekhine defense as well as the Danish Gambit, which some of you uh, play in your regular games. So let us start with first the differences. So after d4 knight f6, white has this move c4, and in this position again there are two big trees. So one starts with e6 and one starts with the move g6. So g6 leads to the King's Indian, Grunfeld and Benoni complexes. These three openings are there, and if you are playing the move e6, then it is more about the Nimzo-Indian, Queen's Indian or Queen's Gambit decline territory. So speaking a little about this, King's Indian is one of those openings where you give up the center, but you aim to counter later in the center with the move c5 or e5. So this is like the mainline position in the mainline theory in the King's Indian. So this is the opening where black has given up the center, but he is going to control the center later on with the help of his pieces. So this is one of the ways. The move d5 in this position. So after d4 knight f6, c4 g6, knight c3 d5 is the Grunfeld defense, which has been employed by grandmasters such as Peter Swidler, Jan Nepomniachtchi, who usually play it. Now this also leads to imbalanced play. uh, Explaining the fundamentals about the d4, I would give you an example of this. Now one thing you have to keep in mind is that in some of the positions, the theories that you employ when you play, let's say, one e4 systems, is that you either sacrifice pawn and you get initiative and you go for quick development. In when white plays one d4, he can be more subtle about his ideas. He might not go for an immediate attack, and also it applies to black side as well. So the kind of a play that is developed out of this one d4 systems is more positional in nature, and you have to take care the factors such as the pawn structure, the long term advantage. The initiative is of course there, but it is in different format. It is not in form of a piece play, it is more of a long term strategic principle. Like for example, if I just give you example of a Nimzo-Indian defense. In the Nimzo-Indian defense, after e6 knight c3, so bishop b4 is the Nimzo-Indian defense. Now in this particular position, white has couple of moves. We'll come to it later on. But for example, the one of the moves that we are going to look at is the Samisch variation, which is the a3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3. Now in this position, black has the move c5. This is the one of the main moves. And after d takes c5, if we just count the pure material, white is pawn up in this position. But if you ask computer about this position, usually nobody takes on c5 in such structures. This is already -1. So you can see that the advantage that black has in this particular case is not the material advantage, it's the long term strategic advantage. Look at white's structure. Even though he has a pawn up, these three pawns are potentially going to be weak in the end game or in the middle game, and black will attack them and it would be difficult to defend them, and white has taken a lot of time to get this particular structure. So this position is already slightly better for black. If you ask even a computer, it will show that -1, it is close to -1, -0.9 or something. So you can see the fight that is generated out of the d4 opening. One of the examples, if I give you from the line that I usually employ, is the Slav defense. So after d4, d5, c4, c6 is the move, and after knight f3, knight f6, so far the moves are natural. Knight c3. Now this is the classical Slav. Now again, d takes c4 is the classical Slav, and e6 is the semi-Slav variation. So these are the two lines that are there after the Queen's Gambit. So just to give an example, after d takes c4, if I give you if I ask you a question, that which move do you think is white's main line theory here, like which move does the theory recommend here? Now as an e4 player, all of you would say okay, e3 is a move or e4 is a move. Indeed, these two are the possibilities, but what top grandmasters and what is considered theoretically the best move is in fact the a4 move in this position. Now you can see the plans and ideas are already becoming subtle at this point. He's just so black has captured a pawn, right? But he is not in a hurry to capture it. He is just preventing it temporarily. He's stopping the pawn advance to b5 because it can be captured by white, and he is going to capture it later. So you can already feel the way white treats such type of structures. Okay, I will quickly go through the theory against the d4 system. So I have explained you about the Grunfeld move order, the King's Indian move order. After d4, knight f6, c4, e6. Now at this point white has two main ways to continue. One of them is knight f3 and the other one is knight c3. Now if your opponent plays knight c3, you have two choices. One of them is to play d5 and play the Queen's Gambit declined variations, and the move that I am going to recommend you today is the move bishop to b4, which is known as the Nimzo-Indian defense. Now this is only possible if the knight is developed to c3. Now if the knight is developed to f3, you actually have I will say four choices in this particular case, because Bogo Indian defense is one of the main lines. There is also d5, which will lead to traditional Queen's Gambit declined setups. Now this is the Queen's Gambit declined variation. There is the move bishop b4 is one move, d5 is one move, c5 is one of the moves, the Benoni that you can play as a black side. So these three are actually the main moves in this positions. Knight c6, also there are some lines the known as the knight's tango, like you can play them a bit of a sideline. But yeah, these three main moves are actually the main ones: bishop b4, d5 and c5. So these three choices are there, and against the move knight f3. Also after e6 there is this move g3 that white can play, which is known as the Catalan opening for the white side. So this also you need to know. Again, there are two possibilities for black. We can play bishop e7 here, or he can give a check. There is a theory on it already. So after d4, knight f6, these are the lines that black can choose to play. So if you are playing d4, d5, the critical test of this line is the move c4. Like Queen's Gambit is the way to continue if you are focusing on the opening theory. Now in this particular line, there is the move c6, that is known as the Slav defense. There is move e6, that is the Queen's Gambit decline. There is the move e5, known as the Albin counter attack. It's a bit of a sideline. There is the Marshall defense. Marshall defense is not really a good opening, I think. This move just allows white to grab the center, and he can play e4, or he gets a perfect center usually. So Marshall defense is also not the main line. So c6 is the main move, and now depending on what move order you choose, after knight c3, black has two choices. One is to go into the classical Slav, and the other one is the semi-Slav variation, which was heavily discussed in Anand Kramnik World Championship games, if you know. So back to the theory. Now let us start discussing some of the games in these lines. I think the introduction phase is enough for this one. I have covered in all the lines that white and black both can employ against each of the moves, so you can choose accordingly. So we will now begin with the Budapest Gambit, and I think it will suit your style because it is very similar to the Alekhine defense, and also it's a gambit play, so very similar to Danish Gambit. One thing you have to keep in mind is that the opening transpositions are possible. Like for example, if you prepare, I think I had it in one of my tournament games that if I played d4 and somebody played e5 against me, now white can play e4 here and it would be a strange transposition to the Danish Gambit. So I also played e4 in my tournament game, and yeah, I guess I had it against some of the player. But you don't really have to be worried from black side. You have to be prepared for the Danish Gambit from black side if you are playing d4 e5. So there are transpositions that are possible. If you are playing, let's say, d4 c5, white can play e4 and it can get transposed to the Smith-Morra Gambit, which you most of you also play. So let us start with the Budapest Gambit. So d4 knight f6 is the move here, and after c4 black plays the move e5. So after d takes e5, we are just sacrificing a pawn. Black plays the move knight to g4. Now he is attacking this pawn, so white has two choices. He can either give it away and it will cost black some time to in order to regain that pawn. So either he can protect the pawn or he can give it up and continue on the development. So let us look at this first example where white decided to give it away. Now the thing is, as an attacking player and as a gambit player, you should never move your pieces twice in the opening just to capture a pawn. When you have started an attacking play, you should continue it by opening it up further. So d6 is the move here. Now we want to take this pawn anyway next move. Also we want to get the other knight out and then maybe capture with other knight. So let's see what happened in the game. White immediately captured, so there was no pawn on e5. And after bishop takes d6, this is the typical mistake that white does in this position, is to play the move h3. And you can see out of a gambit we have got a nice piece play here with our pieces. Both the bishops and the knights are open, they are quite in active position, and it is already black to play and win in this particular position. So you can pause the video and have a think that how would you win this position from the black side. So black has a nice tactic in this position, which is the move knight takes f2. Now this is a clear fork, so after this fork the knight has to be taken, and after king takes f2 there is the move queen to h4 check, forcing the king to f3. The move g3 won't really change anything, since after that you can just take it and it would be checkmate. So king to f3 or e3, there are two choices. In the game king to f3 was played, but then it's a forced checkmate. So queen g3 check, king e4, and I think I would advise you again to try it. It's mate in 2 from black side. You can pause the video and have a think. It's black to play and mate in 2. Yes, I'm sure you have spotted it. So let me show the solution. The solution is bishop to f5 check, and after king takes f5 it's queen g6, and it's a checkmate. So this was one of the quick wins for black in the Budapest Gambit. You can say it's a bit like a balestra mate, this construction where the queen and bishops are, it's not exactly the balestra mate, but it's quite similar to it. And yes, black won quite quickly here. So you can see the potential of this opening, that black can score a quick win in this particular line by going for a piece play, by developing quickly with bishop d6 and then this knight f2. So there is a temptation in white side to kick this knight out as early as possible, because you can see that black is creating some unpleasant threats already in this position. He can castle first of all easily. White has barely developed a single piece, and then he is going for a very quick piece play here. So this was the first quick win in the Budapest Gambit. Now remember this line, after c4 you play e5, and in this particular game knight c3 was played, and this idea is typical. We offer one more pawn and then we go from there. And yeah, for bishop d6, this h3 is a very typical mistake that many of the players will do. So let us go to the next game now. So Okay, so this is another example in the Budapest Gambit. Now let's see what white did in this particular game. So d4, knight f6, c4, e5 again, and in this time white played the move d5 in this particular case. So he's not ready to accept the gambit, but now this gives away the c5 square, so black developed easily with the move c5, bishop c5, and after bishop to g5, it's very similar to the legal mate. So what would you play here as black? So black played the move knight to e4 here, and I think this was played in 1936, and the white player did not realize that after taking the queen, it's actually a mate in one. So this is a typical idea that is there in a legal mate, as we know. So knight to e4, and again after bishop takes d8, bishop takes f2, and this game was finished. So this was another quick win. So you can see that we are focusing on the opening theory here. So after e5, it's not so easy for white to refute this gambit by playing a move like d5. Now this is already a strategic concession since it allows the c5 access to the c5 square, and black immediately got control over it and was hit with a nice tactic, and then white was hit with a nice tactic, and another quick win for black in this particular setup. So let us see the next game. I have chosen some of the miniatures just to give you the feel of this Budapest Gambit. In the later videos we can go and check a little bit of theory as well in it, but you're already getting some idea about the theory as well. So in the next game, let's see what white did. So d4, knight f6, c4, e5. Now this time white took this pawn on e5. Now knight to g4, and now knight to f3. So now you can see that he is hanging on to this pawn, and now let's see how we are supposed to treat this position from black side. So knight to c6, attacking the pawn on e5 again. So e4 was played. Now finally, see, white can't hold on to this pawn for longer. We are going to see the lines where bishop to b4 is played in the later part. But in this particular case, white plays e4, and this is a good move. So black plays bishop to c5, hitting the pawn on f2, and bishop to g5 was played in this particular line. So very interesting play here. He is trying to attack the queen here, and maybe black won't take on f2 in this particular case, but if you calculate properly, you can actually take on f2 in this position, and after king e2, there is quite a nice move that black played here. Again, I would give you a chance to spot it. It's black to move. What would you play from black side here? So black has a nice resource here that is kind of a distraction tactic. So knight to d4 check was played. Now after knight takes d4, we would just capture this bishop. So in the game, queen takes d4 was played, as our queen is also under attack. But white did not calculated this properly, as after bishop takes d4, bishop take d8, there followed bishop take b2, and actually white resigned in this game because bishop takes a1 is going to happen next, and black is completely winning here. So this was the example where after c4 e5, white protected this pawn on e5 once, but after knight c6 e4, this bishop c5 move, this bishop g5 is already a mistake in this position. And you can see that if he is playing a move like e4 here, then it's already, I think, quite difficult for white to stop this idea that a piece is going to appear on f2. So this whole idea was based on this move that he was hoping to work, that bishop g5 would work, but actually this knight d4 is a nice distraction theme that helps black to not only save the game but in fact win the game. So this was, yeah, another miniature in this particular line. Now this next one is similar to the Caro-Kann variation trap. So those who don't know the Caro-Kann, the trap in the Caro-Kann variation, there's the move e4 c6, d4 d5, knight c3, d takes e4, knight takes e4, and after knight d7, white can play this tricky move queen e2, and hoping that black would play the move knight g to f6, which is a big blunder in this position, which is the main idea of the black side in the Caro-Kann, basically to challenge this knight, but not when white plays queen e2, and white to play and mate in one. I think you all must know this trap, that knight d6 is a checkmate here. So let us look at this game where black managed to do that in this particular game. So d4, knight f6, c4, e5, d takes e5, knight g4. Again, knight to f3 was played, knight to c6, and now in this game, bishop to f4 was played. So now we have seen the variety that white has against this particular gambit. Now bishop to b4 check is again the move that sends white on the back foot. So knight bd2 was played, and now queen to e7. And now you can see that this e5 pawn, it's not actually a clear pawn for white ever in this Budapest gambit, because it is going to be recaptured anyways, since when he puts the knight on f3, he can't really protect it even further. So yeah, black wins the pawn back. But in this particular game, a3 was played. Now instead of moving the bishop, black tried a little trick that he took on e5 first, and the white player did not realize the threat, and he just captured the bishop. He said the free bishop. But black had some nice trap in mind. Can you spot it? It's black to play and win. I'm sure you will spot it. It's not really that difficult. So again, as I have explained you in an intro, the Caro-Kann trap, knight d3 is just a checkmate here. So one thing I would like to focus your attention on in this particular Budapest Gambit thing is that after knight g4, and once black develops this piece play, there is an immediate initiative in the center that is generated by the black pieces, which white should know perfectly well how to neutralize it. Otherwise, black can score a quick win, like we have seen in a couple of these examples. Let me see if I have some other win as well. Oh, this one is very nice. This one is by Paul Keres actually. Now you must have heard this name. Paul Keres is a big name, and he has employed it from black side as well. So when somebody like him does it, I think it's definitely a serious opening to consider, at least for white side as well, and from black side as well, from our point of view for playing it. But white also should study this. So after in this game, white played bit modestly. I think he must be is a Paul Keres's opponent must be shocked here when he played the move e5, because Paul Keres is a classical guy who plays classical openings, and suddenly he's hit with e5. Now those were the over the board tournaments, so something like mouse click is not possible here. So by the way, it's a good thing to note that in your leeches game, if you want to play the Nimzo-Indian, but if you do the mouse flip, you can also play this opening. So I think that's a good idea. So e3 was played, a bit modest move. Now Keres immediately exploited it, and now white even took with the queen, so bringing one more piece out with the tempo, and queen to d1. Now the thing is, if you notice what I'm showing you right now is that this is the d4 opening, but the play generated is exactly similar to the e4 lines. So whenever it's a gambit line, the play has to be continued as a gambit, except for some of the positional queen's gambit territory where the play is slow. And we are going to, in the later part, we are going to look at extremely slow play and careful play from both the sides, especially from black side when he plays the Nimzo-Indian. There is nothing like immediate piece activity or anything. He's just sitting passive, sitting solid. But white is the one who has to create something. Otherwise, in the long term, black is just strategically better and he will win. So in this particular game, d5 was played. Again, a typical break in the center, getting a piece play. Bishop to e6, knight takes d5. And you can already see that black has three pieces in the center in this particular line. So e4 was played, and knight to f6, and this position, believe it or not, is already slightly better for black because of this tremendous piece play that he has. So queen takes d8, rook take d8, and bishop to g5 was white's idea, but it's already black to play and win. I think I should give you a chance to spot it. It's black to play and win. What would you play here? So there was quite a nice move that was played by Paul Keres, knight to d4. And now just notice the threats in the position. So first of all, there is a huge weakness on b3, which when knight will attack the rook would have to move to a2, which is not a comfortable square. There is a knight c2 fork, which is the big deal, of course, which is the main threat in the position. So in the game, bishop to d3 was played in order to stop that, and now it's black to play and win. I think it's quite easy. You can, I think just within 30 seconds, you should be able to spot this one. After this move, the game actually ended. So yes, black played the move knight to b3, and white resigned here quite simply, since the rook is under attack and the bishop is also under attack. So a quiet and deadly double attack here, which ended the game. So this was Paul Keres, and now this time we have seen this move e3. What if white plays modestly this particular and does not accept this sacrifice. Now let me go to the next. Okay, now this in this game d4 knight f6 c4 e5 d takes e5 knight g4. We are already familiar with this stuff. White chose a rare move in this one, queen to d4, putting question to knight on g4. But now if you are familiar with the theme, actually this is not a puzzle, but I think I can ask you to pause the video again and try to not actually pause the video, just guess the move that black played here. I think it should be natural to you by now, in what spirit we are going to play this opening. Yes, black played the move d6, e takes d6, and as a gambit player, you should never be afraid of sacrificing pawns. So bishop takes d6 was played. Now knight to f3, castle h3, knight to c6, gaining a tempo. And now the question is asked to white side, what he should do with his queen. Now in the game, unfortunately, he chose the wrong square. He went back to d1, and now it is black to play and win again. So you can see all these games are just less than 10 moves, and white has played perfectly normal moves. None of these moves looks bad, but this knight on g4 is just a tremendous piece in this particular line, which is punishing white every time. So you can see white is so far has played perfectly normal. The idea looks a bit strange, queen d4, but it's not that big. Doesn't look like a big mistake. So how does black win here? So black has a fantastic tactical resource, which is knight takes f2 again. So again there is a fork that needs to be addressed, and after king takes f2, there would follow bishop to c5 is also winning, but bishop to g3 is a neat way to finish the game off, as the queen is getting lost on the next move. So yeah, I think it's a serious opening. Let me see if I have some other game as well. Okay, I'll go quickly through this one as well. So in this particular game, now this opening phase I would not explain again since we already know it. Now in this game, after d6 ed6, bishop takes d6. In the last game we saw that white developed the knight on f3. Now in this game white thought, oh, I should grab a pawn on g7, it's for free, right? But then there followed bishop e5, and again white just resigned after 6 moves basically. So the thing is, the queen is almost trapped. There is only one square that the queen can go to, which is g5. After that we will simply exchange and we'll take on b2 and we'll win the rook on the next move. I think I was amazed with the way the games end in this particular opening. I think I have seen I also play the Danish Gambit, the Mora Gambit. I have used it in my games, but the traps and the variety of traps that are there in this opening are just simply amazing. I think in the Danish Gambit there are ideas like you have sometimes e5 and then bishop takes f7, winning the queen. Sometimes there is a move like bishop takes f7, queen b3 check, which wins the bishop. But then the ideas are limited in this. The traps that we have seen so far, I think, are just they are just too much in variety. So in one of them we saw a queen trap leading to a rook loss. This bishop takes b2 was quite annoying theme in many of the things we have seen. This knight takes f2 theme is there again. There's knight d3 checkmate pattern. So I think there are quite a lot of traps in this opening. I think it's a serious opening, definitely for a blitz game. It's definitely a serious opening. And also, even in classical games, I think white really has to know how he's going to neutralize this initiative and continue. So let us go to the next game. Okay, it looks like there is looks like we have covered this one, right? It's just 5 moves long, so we can scroll through it. There is no problem in checking it. Yeah, this one is covered. A legal strap. See, you can see a legal strap out of this. Like you will rarely see it from the Danish Gambit. I think the legal strap is I think not that much available, but you can see the wide variety of the traps that are there. Okay, I think that was it about the this particular gambit. After d4 knight f6, just to revise it once, this e5, I think it has a flavor of Alekhine and Danish Gambit, as I said earlier. So this knight g4, and you already know the how tricky this knight on g4 is. So this is a gambit opening that you can explore yourself as well, more theory about it, but I think it's definitely a good opening to begin with us playing against d4. By the way, before going to the Nimzo-Indian territory, I would explain you the sidelines that white can choose in this particular d4 systems. So when white plays d4, he can actually intend to play three. Yeah, I think as far as I know, there are three opening setups that he can use in his games, which are not concerned with the move c to c4. Like one of them, you already know, I play it in tournament games as well, is the London system. So d4 d5, and then white will usually play the move knight f3 and then bring the bishop out, then complete the triangle setup, bring the bishop to d3 and castle. This is the London system, which is like a semi, not a semi Slav, it's basically a Slav with reversed color. So white is employing a Slav defense from white side, you can say that. So London system is one of the way. There is one way to continue, which is the Cole system, which is to put the pawns on here and then put the bishop on d3 and knight on f3 and castle, and it is basically a reversed semi-Slav from white side. There is a system where Cole Zukertort system, where the setup is same. You put your pawn on e3, knight f3, bishop d3, you castle, you put your bishop on b2 in that particular thing, so not like a London system, and then eventually you try to get knight to e5 and you go from there. So these are the setups also that you need to know something about them. So yeah, these are the ways that if white doesn't want to continue in the Queen's Gambit manner, doesn't want to enter into this c4 lines, then he can choose from one of them. Apart from them, I don't think there is any real sideline that is there for white side. So yeah, so these are the ways that white can continue. And now let us focus on the classical part of this particular lecture, so the Nimzo-Indian. Okay, so we are going to start with a game of Levon Aronian. Now, I think I should also tell you one more important thing. Who are the players that you should look up to while preparing the Nimzo-Indian? For the Nimzo-Indian, the player is who played it from both the sides is Vladimir Kramnik. You should definitely check out his games. Peter Leko is one of the biggest theoreticians of these openings. You should definitely check his games as well. Vishwanathan Anand has employed it a couple of times. Magnus Carlsen plays it. Nimzo Indian is basically in the repertoire of all the top players. There is no exception to it. But these are the players who play it regularly. Wesley So plays it from the current, the new upcoming fields. Wesley So plays it. Also, Boris Gelfand has a couple of games in it. So you can see basically that the Nimzo Indian has been employed by all the top GMs. Now let us start discussing this opening. So after d4, knight f6, c4, we play the move e6, and after knight to c3, we intend to play bishop to b4. Now as I explained already, white has g3 and knight f3 as a choices in this particular case. After knight f3, it's up to you to choose the Bogo Indian or the Benoni. But after knight c3, black plays the move bishop to b4, and at this point already white has many choices in this position. He has the move g3, f3, e3, a3, queen b3, queen c2. Also there is knight to f3, which is one of just let me reload the game. When I make too many arrows, I think the software. Okay, so just getting to the move bishop to b4, there are choices like all of those I mentioned. There is also queen a4 that is rarely employed. Also there is yeah, these are all the options that are there in the position. The main line is the classical main line is the queen c2, which is quite popular at the top level, and f3 and a3 are likely to transpose into each other. As so today we are going to look at the system where, now basically explaining a strategic concept of the Nimzo Indian is that by playing the move bishop to b4, we are pinning this knight and immediately gaining us control over this e4 square. So a3 is the move which is known as the Samisch variation. By the way, I should point out this difference that are in the King's Indian. If you consider the Samisch variation, which is knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, this f3 system in the uh, King's Indian is the Samisch variation, and in the Nimzo Indian, the f3 system is not really a Samisch variation. The a3 system is the Samisch variation. So now this move actually puts immediately question to our strategy, like what this bishop on b4 is doing. I am ready to exchange it, so white will gain the two bishop advantage. So what black does here is that black takes on c3, and now we have to think about this Nimzo-Indian opening from a particular from a completely different eye. We have to treat it. So your play is not going to be a piece play in this particular case. Black is going to play against this double pawn. So there is some structural concession that has been caused in a white structure here, and we are going to play against that particular setup. So in this position there are three ways, actually two are actually there are more than three ways, but the serious ones are the move c5, the move b6, and there is also a sideline known as the move knight to e4, which is quite interesting. So I think I like these three moves for black here in this particular case. I'm going to show you one of the games from the b6 lines, like this is the way to continue. And now explaining the general strategy that black is going to employ in this b6 variation basically is that he is going to, now this move you would think that this bishop is going to go here. Well, that's not the case, because the bishop is going, if we put the bishop on b7, what white is going to do in this particular setup is he's going to put the pawns on f3 and e4. So if we are an e4 player, we think, oh, knight f3 is going to come, e3, bishop d3, and so on. But no, the white strategy is different. When he plays this particular Samisch variation, he's going to put his pawn on f3, pawn on e4, and later on he's going to develop a strong attack on the king side. So the point of b6 is in fact not to put the bishop on b7, but to put it on a6, and then we are going to continue with knight c6, knight a5, attacking this pawn on c4. So already you can see we are not aiming the king here, we are aiming at this double pawns. These are the weaknesses in the position and we are going to aim at it. So let's see what happened in this game. This knight e4 is actually quite active try that black has. The point is that white can't play f3 because there is queen h4 check, again an instant trap that will give a huge advantage to black. So this is actually not just a move that just threatens the c3 pawn. It is also based on a concrete threat that the f3 move has been stopped by playing this move knight e4. So I think it's a serious alternative. But anyway, in this game knight to c6 was played, f3, b6. So we transposed into the b6 line basically from a different move order. So this is the game of Levon Aronian playing from black side against one of the players. So as I explained earlier, you can see that white has built up a strong pawn center here, but he has the structural weakness that black is going to attack. So let's see how the game continued. He played the move d6, bishop to d3, knight to a5, and you already know the strategy. One thing to keep in mind is that we don't want to commit our pawn structure as a Nimzo-Indian player. So we unless it leads us to getting the advantage, we are not going to push for any pawn breaks here early in the opening. We are going to concentrate on white weaknesses and just going to attack it. So this bishop d3, the idea of this move is that when we will attack the pawn on c4 twice, white will play the move queen e2 to cover this pawn, and then in this game bishop g5 was played, h6, bishop h4, bishop a6, and queen a2. As I said earlier, this is the idea. And now queen to d7 was played. Now the idea of this move is not only to step out of the pin, we are not really worried about this double pawn since it will open the g file for our rook, and we are also not scared to put our king in the center since the pawn structure we can lock it at any point. So white is not going to open up the position, so the king is not going to come under any trouble soon. So a4 was played in this case, and the idea of queen d7 is to actually put the queen on c6 to target this pawn even further. So this move was played, d5, and queen just retreats. And in this game bishop takes f6. Now what if white takes the pawn on e6? Then after f takes e6, let's say he goes for e5. You have to remember this important strategic concept in this particular case is that after d takes e5, let's say white exchanges and plays the move bishop to e4. Now we can play the move c6, but there is actually a way to offer a positional exchange sacrifice here by playing the move queen c8. And after bishop takes 8, queen takes 8, this is also perfectly playable for black. You can notice that he has a central pawn majority. The c4 pawn is going to drop on the next move. His king is most likely come to e7, the rook will join on d8, And yeah, this is completely playable for black, even though he is an exchange down. White's rook, very often you will see, as in this example as well, you will see later on in the game. So bishop takes f6, g takes f6, followed in the game. You will see that even though white has an exchange up, the rook really can't do anything, because if rook lacks the open files, the rook is actually not of any use. So rook to b1 was played, queen to c8, stepping out of any c5 ideas. So knight to h3, knight to b7, and now after knight to f4, white intends to put his knight on h5, creating a cramped position for black king. So h5 was played in order to gain some space. Now g4, h takes g4, f takes g4, and now knight to c5, getting a nice square on this c5 square. So you can see how black is playing against these structural weaknesses. He has this wonderful outpost for this knight on c5. Also, this pawn is permanently weak. Whenever black gets a chance, he is going to open up the position, and the c4 pawn is going to come under attack. So knight h5, king e7, again protecting the f6 pawn, keeping the king quite nicely in the center, and white castled here. And I think the next attacking plan that was employed by Levon Aronian is quite impressive in this particular case. So I will give you a chance to figure out what black did in this particular position. There is a nice way you can create an attack in this case. So black started out his attacking idea with the move rook to h6, and now the idea must be clear that he wants to bring this queen here and rook here, and suddenly you will realize that this bishop is a bad piece, taking care of only these two pawns. These rooks are not really doing anything. Also, the move rook h6 protects this pawn on f6, so also important. And this g4 move, which was played with the aggressive intention, is in fact now a weakness. So queen to e3 was played, queen h8, rook f2, setting up a defense here with rook to g2 later on. So rook to g2, and now black already found a nice way to get an advantage here. Knight takes d3, queen takes d3, and rook g6, hitting the pawn on g4. So queen f3 was played. Also, there could have been possibilities of sacrificing the queen as well, but not immediately. So queen f3 was played in order to safeguard it as well. Now bishop takes c4. So finally the weak pawn dropped. And now this is the case. Now we will see what happened in the game. Rook to d1 was played. Now rook takes g4. Black found this nice tactic, and after rook takes g4, queen takes h5. So we are taking the advantage of this pin that the rook can't be captured on g8, and in fact we are going to take the rook on g4. So h3 was played, rook takes g4, pawn takes g4, and queen g5. And let us take the count in this position. If we count the pawns, black has two pawns, I think. Yeah, black has two pawns and a bishop for the rook, and black is already winning this position. You can see the rook lacks the open file, so the king f2 move was played in order to get the open file for the rook. But even if it gets the open file, there are no targets in the black position, and is all the weaknesses that are there on exactly on the light squares, and black just went on to pick up all these weaknesses one by one. So we'll see, we'll quickly go through this phase. So he captured the pawn on d5, bishop takes d5 was also played, rook e1, bishop e6, and these pawns are just going to ensure that black is going to win this game in the long run. So let's just scroll through the moves to see how Levon finished off the opponent. See, even he played the move king d7. He's not even afraid of exchanging queens when he is exchanged down, because after queen g5, this particular exchange, even the pawn structure has improved for black, and you can see all the weaknesses are there on light squares. So this is the strategic Nimzo-Indian that we are seeing here. The weaknesses are exploited quite nicely because they are on the same color. So queen g6, king f2, f5, again breaking the structure, winning a pawn, and now Levon quite masterfully grabbed both these two pawns as well. So we will just go through the moves, as it's not a really an endgame technique lecture. It's the matter of technique for Aronian to finish this game off. In this particular position, it's a bishop and three pawns for an exchange, so it's definitely a huge advantage. And a couple of moves later, white player resigned. Levon actually managed to win both the pawns. So just let's scroll through the moves. He eventually captured the c3 pawn as well. Now if queen takes the bishop, then queen will capture the rook, and also it's just a three pawn. I think I can even stop at this point because It's just a matter of technique till he finished off the game. And I think in just four or five moves later, White resigned the game, so he eventually won this pawn as well because there was a pin. And then yeah, it's just a matter of technique. White resigned. He played on for two or three more moves, but you can already see the idea that this a pawn is ready to march, and yeah, basically that's it. So if we go again to the opening phase after the move e6, knight c3, bishop b4, this idea of Samisch variation, White immediately puts question to this black strategy of putting the bishop on b4. So he immediately tries to exploit the this weakness by playing the a3 and getting a bishop pair and trying to build up a strong center. But in fact, this long-term strategic play that black has with this b6 and knight a5 and bishop a6 plan is, I think, quite a strategic concept, and this is something new. So you have to see the treatment of the position that has been employed by black is something new. To learn, like it's not a usual play where in e4, let's say, where we develop pieces and crush opponent. It's more of a long-term strategic play that gave black a victory in this particular case. So just to revise the queen d7, this is the idea of queen c6. I have actually one more game to show. Let us go through the options as well. So yeah, but basically covering this one, these are the common ideas when you employ this move b6 after the capture. Now in this game, knight c6 and later on b6 was played, but basically focusing this b6 move is I think one of the main moves to continue. Now let us look at another example. Now this was a brilliant game actually between Mikhail Botvinnik playing from white side against Alexander Kotov playing from black side. Again a Nimzo-Indian, and now in this particular variation after a3, bishop c3, bc3, I am giving you a choice here actually. Instead of move b6, you can also play this move d5, which is also main line. So in this game, black went with a straightforward approach of, now this is a bit of a Karokan like structure, I think, already the exchange variation. And again, white, I think white played it a bit too passively in this particular case, as black immediately got a comfortable position. See, white has a weakness that he has created himself. Mikhail Botvinnik is the former world champion who is playing from white side. He got destroyed out of this opening just quite simply. Black is just developing his pieces quite naturally, so continuing the development. Bishop to d7, queen to d6, trying to get rook e7 and rook e8. So queen d6 was played. So rook g1, b6, again keeping the structure solid, and then rook e7, rook e8. And you can see this pawn structure, this white pawn on a4 has been provoked into playing a4 here. So it is also on the light square. And now black just closed the position, and after g4, g5, knight to e2, black immediately break through in the position with a nice tactic. So rook takes e3 was played, and after knight g3, it is black to play and win. And I think I would give you a chance to find a way that Alexander Kotov won a nice game here against the former world champion. It's black to play and win. I think this is the trickiest of all in the today's section. So queen takes g3 is a fantastic finish, and after king takes g3, knight e4. You can see the use of both the pin as well as the knight fork in this particular case, and white resigned here. So yeah, this is another way to continue. In the first game we saw b6 setups. In this game we saw d5 setups, and I can discuss one more, I think, with you. I think I have one more. Now this game was a real classic as well. We are more concerned about the opening ideas, so I am not focusing in this lecture on the tactical details that are there in all the lines. So we have the Nimzo-Indian again, and a3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and now c5. So I have already given you three moves here: c5, b6, and d5. These three moves you can employ it. Also knight e4, I have mentioned that is one of the critical moves. Actually four moves against the Samisch variation. So you are not also predictable now, because you can choose this in different games. It's very important when you will play in a tournament game. You should not be predictable. Like you should never play with just one opening. So your opponent will never know that if he is the Samish player, you might play c5, you might play b6, knight e4, or d5. there must be some choices. So c5, and as I explained earlier, that this dc5, then queen a5, or even knight a6 is, I think, the mainline theory here. This pawns are just weaknesses. So in this game e4 was played, queen a5, still e5, and knight e4. And you can see black is already trying to put pressure on c3 pawn with the help of his piece play. So bishop d2, knight c6, and I already like black's position since he has quite activity and is already threatening to win a pawn here. So knight to f3 was played, knight takes c3, queen c2, e takes d4. Now if you take the knight, if you take the pawn on d4, then there is queen takes e5 and we win the knight back. For example, after bishop e2 we will take on d4, and yeah, if let's say bishop to c3, then we can just take the queen with check. So that's the point, and black will be better here. So after a4, b6 was played, and again the strategic principle is the same. We want to play the move bishop to a6 here. So bishop e2, bishop a6, king to f1 was played, because if we again place the move knight takes d4, then we have knight takes d4, and if queen takes c3, then we are not actually going to take on c3 and play knight c2, but we even have a queen takes e5 here, which threatens a mate, which is very difficult to stop, as you can see from the position. So queen e3 would run into knight c2, for example, it would be a 4, and yeah, there are not really a good ways to defend this mates. Queen f3 is not playable, and if white plays queen d3, then this knight takes e2, and suddenly the rook on a1 would be hanging. So after king f1, white finally decided that he can't castle, so he decided to put the king on f1. But now rook c8 happened in the game. All these moves also you can see are aimed against this pawn on c4, which is a big weakness. And after g3, knight e5, knight d4, knight takes e2. This is again a brilliancy. This pin was there, so maybe white thought that he's gaining back some material, but black in fact sacrificed even a queen in this position. Bishop takes a5, knight takes d4, and he got too many pieces for the queen. And after rook takes c4, you can already see that this bishop, two knights, and rook are just too powerful. Now there is a huge discover check threat in the position. So white, instead of defending the bishop, first defended the queen, because rook b4 could have won a queen with the help of discovery. So king g2 was played, and now a nice mating attack followed. Bishop to b7, king to h3 was tried, knight to d3, attacking the queen. See, black is not even concerned about winning this bishop, he is just going for the king in this position. Queen to d3, knight f3, hitting the queen again, and in this position queen to e3 was played, and it's black to play, and I think this will be the final position for today. It's black to play and win. So nice checkmate there. Yeah, black has this wonderful resource, which is the move knight to g5, and it's a distraction theme again. After queen takes g5, there would follow knight take f2, which is very pretty mate. This bishop is there, this knight is there, and this rook is there. Only with three pieces, black is able to finish off the white king here. So yeah, this was about it. Just to revise, what we have seen in today's lecture is the one gambit line, which is the move e5. Even if you mouse slip and play e5, you also know about this thing. So after d5, we have seen the Budapest Gambit, some of the traps in this particular line. We have seen the Nimzo-Indian, the Samisch variation of the Nimzo-Indian, where we give white this double pawn and we play against them. I have discussed with you four lines here actually, but we have seen games in three of the lines. So b6 is a move, c5 is a move, d5 is a move, and knight d4 is a move. So these four actually choices that I have given you in this particular case. So yeah, we'll meet now in the next lecture. I think I'm also going to cover one lecture on the advanced tactics. So the next lecture might be on that topic. I will inform you accordingly. But this series of the Nimzo-Indian will, I think, continue. I will definitely discuss some more lines as well. So this was about the Budapest Gambit and Zemis variation of the Nimzo-Indian today. If you have any comments on any of the lines, if you have any doubts, you can ask in comment section. I check them usually. I think on the checkmate patterns as well, there were some exercises given to you. I hope you have solved those. Um, and yeah, we can discuss the later part in the later video. That's it for today. Take care. Bye bye.